Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Welcome to this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. I am your host, John Reid. We'd like to thank the LCPM network for making this all possible as we continue to be a voice for Planning District 16, from Stafford to Spotsylvania to Fredericksburg to King George and the Caroline counties. And in this week's episode, we're going to talk about an important voting rights legislation that may be on life support. We're also going to be talking with Spotsylvania School Board Representative Nicole as she continues to fight for equity in public schools within Spotsylvania. And finally, what is the one issue that we're not talking about in terms of education reform? So as you join us, we are thankful that you're spending your time with us and getting yourself prepared for the battles ahead. Last week, we received a report, SJ1. We talked about SJ1 and its importance when it comes to voting rights. And what it was presented to as sponsored by Democrat Senator Mamie Lockley of Hampton was that it was to give Virginia voters an opportunity to decide if those who are what we call reformed citizens, because we don't use the word felons, those who are reformed citizens are given the opportunity to vote once they have served their time. Now, if those men know, it is Virginia law that states that anyone who has served their time must be given permission to vote again by the governor on a case-by-case basis. Well, we also know that that's one of the things that has happened with the new Youngkin administration, that it has been the suppression of voting rights. This is why we have continually talked about it on this show. And organizations such as the Virginia NAACP State Conference has rallied to make sure that people know this is an issue that still must take front and center. So last week, it got struck down at a House subcommittee by party lines, which voted down 6-4 that SJ1 would not pass. And according to the General Assembly, that any referendum on a bill must have consecutive years of being approved before it become into law. But the Virginia NAACP State Conference held a virtual rally on March the 3rd to discuss the necessity of having voting rights restored for reformed citizens. And so even though it is many saying that it is on life support, many of us know that it is still a matter of taking action in order to have our voices heard. So you ask yourself, what can I do to get my voice heard? Well, you can go into our sister website, www.pwperspective.com. Once again, that's www.pwperspective.com. And there's a link in there to show you how to reach out to your legislators and let your voices be heard so that people can know that we need to give reformed citizens a second chance to let their voices be heard in a democracy. A democracy is only strengthened when they're given the opportunities to vote in the legislative process. And joining us right now is someone who I have been waiting for quite some time. When I first started this show, everyone was telling me you have to talk to Nicole of the Spotsylvania School Board of the Battlefield District. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Oh, you're welcome. I am doing well. As busy as ever, but it's all good. So doing well.
And like I said, when we first started this show, and there was a group of people that I really wanted to talk to, and they were saying to me, yeah, this is one person you really, because she has her ear to the pulse of the community, and she is really active in making things happen. And being a former educator myself, it really means a lot to me when hear people who have a real passion for our students. And so I want to go ahead and get right to it. And since you came on board in December of last year, one of the things you have been really campaigning for, really standing up for, is for accountability upon the school board. And we've seen a lot of the things that have happened for people during the school board meetings, and especially with a lot of the changes, the mask mandates. Can you talk to me about that and how that's coming along?
Yeah. So coming into the school board actually now in January, the knowing that in most votes I am in a majority position now, minority position, right? As far as voting, just having an understanding of my fellow board members and making some assumptions about where their mind is on most issues. I came into sitting on the board knowing that if I wasn't able to actually make a difference by my vote, that the way that I needed to make a difference was to try to make the board in its decision making and its voting more accountable, or at least more transparent, so that the public could understand the rationale or lack thereof, even, because that is also telling. So, you do learn something by people's silence, for the decisions that were being made or the votes that were being cast on behalf of different initiatives, policies, funding in regards to our students. So your question was how's that going? It is. I would say it's going okay, in the sense that, I continue to ask the questions. A lot of times there are no answers. There's no, when I ask, what are your goals? I'd like to know from my fellow board members what their agenda is in regards to starting this school year, to benefit the kids in our county. And really from at least for the board members, there was silence. So, in some senses, we have to sort of deduce information from that silence. And then sort of put that silence with the actual behaviors, and make assumptions, because there's not been transparency. That said, it's hard to hold people accountable to things that when they will not actually disclose or communicate. It's been a real struggle to get communication from the other board members amongst ourselves. And so, I've just been trying to do that in as creative ways as possible. Going to board of supervisors meetings, sort of trying to understand who are influencing the decisions of the other my peers on my board. And so going to those meetings, and then I actually get insight on where decisions are being made on my board, unfortunately. But so in a sense, that's where we are. It's not like the best news, or we've not necessarily made the most progress. And I can, I'll let you answer the next question, because I probably will expound on, because of that, there's, I've had to make some pivots in approach, but that's where we are now with the accountability.
Well, can I go back to something you just mentioned? Because you talked about, maybe there's a lot of silence from other members of the school board, but for yourself, and I know you go to the Board of County Supervisors meeting, you're speaking up along with federal representatives, Don Shelley, Dr. Daniels, and what have you. And there was a lot of talk of, they're maybe collaborating and planning this on purpose, but you're three minds of the same mind. And so what's that like when you do have those who are supportive and you are working together to see things happen in the school board or for the school, for the students?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I understand that like the Board of Supervisors, they have every right to talk with school board members. We have rights to talk with them, and we should be having these discussions. It's when they're only talking to certain school board members, and those school board members are making decisions as if they are, before they even come to our meeting, and letting the public weigh in on the perspectives of those, potential decisions that will be made. They've already made their decision based on the conversations that they've made with, or they've had with Board of Supervisors members. And the Board of Supervisors members aren't meeting with everyone on our board. And we don't have to meet, together, because that would constitute a meeting, but But to be, having David Ross or McLaughlin or Martin to actually have a conversation with me, or Don Shelley or Dr. Daniels, versus only talking with the other 4 board members. So that's a problem. And that's where there is, then the public feels like they're not being transparent. We feel like they're not being transparent, and people are co-opting what's supposed to be a corporate board, and making decisions outside of and before we even get an opportunity to have a discussion. So that's an issue. And I talk with the board members. I have to sort of resort to talking with the board members that are willing to communicate with me, or with each other. And that's, Ms. Shelley and Dr. Daniels. I had to sort of work my way around getting a sit down with Robbie Abusmal, and because when I asked for one directly, he wouldn't do it. So and that should not be the case, right? So and the thing is, if all 7 of us had the same agenda in mind, so it's not that Dr. Daniels, Ms. Shelley, and I are colluding, as a minority group. We have the same agenda in mind, which should be all of our agenda, which should be what's the best thing for the children. And so that's why it looks like we're making similar decisions, because we put that first. And so, so it's not that we're colluding, subversively to be a detriment to the Spotsylvania County Public Schools. We're really trying to advocate for them as much as possible, and where we, state things so that hopefully what we say might open a window of some influence to the minds of our colleagues on the board.
Absolutely. And Nicole is joining us. And so I want to go to something, because you have a lot of experience in a financial background. And one of the things that you are always championing for is the investment in students. So can you talk about that? What does that look like when a school district is actually investing in their students to make sure they are progressing?
Yeah. So it looks like making sure that class sizes stay small, so that children can actually get the one-on-one attention that they need when learning a subject matter. And the way that you keep class sizes small is making sure that you have proper educator staffing across the curriculum, the numbers that are needed in order to be able to teach classes. And in order to get those numbers, you have to pay staff competitively, so that they will want to work for our county. So paying proper salaries and incentives and benefits for making sure that we have educators filters down. So I sort of went from the bottom back, but sometimes people don't necessarily realize when we say that investment in children, where it comes from making sure that you're funding the resources that the children need to be able to learn in the public school education, in public schools. And so that's why funding, fully funding a needs-based budget, not necessarily the one that was presented, okay, it's short of making our salaries competitive. But focusing on making salaries competitive actually does make that investment in our children, right? Because it filters down to delivering educational services to our children so that they're in a learning environment where they can thrive. They cannot thrive in a learning environment where, because we don't have enough teachers, and I'm not even going to bring in subs. We don't have enough subs, but subs don't teach, right? Right. So while we want the students to be in their classrooms, if the teacher can't be there, so we put in a sub. We need educators teaching the material to the students. Right now we have students that are going into the auditorium for whole class blocks because we've lost teachers and we can't, hire. And we've lost teachers because of the lack of funding. They're getting recruited by other areas, and I don't blame them. They have to take care of their families as well, which is sort of, another point on the funding. Like, teachers are families have families that exist in Spotsylvania County.
Yes. Mhm.
So paying our teachers is a way to invest in our children. But then, other ways to invest in our children, if we invest in our children's mental health.
Yeah.
So beyond teachers, the social workers or psychologists, or just resources, because, a lot of times what our kids need don't bubble up to having a social worker intervention in the school or a psychologist intervention
Right.
in the school. They won't even go. The student doesn't feel like it's important enough for it to go to that measure. But
Yep.
we can create, we can fund more resources and information and education that can get infused through the curriculum to train our teachers to help our kids recognize when they need more help in regards to their mental health, or supports in regards to their mental health and self-care. So mental health. What else? Just being able to, even for their activities and what they're being able to get exposed to. I mean, so this is something that is, so I came from, my kids went to school and have gone to school in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, Maryland, before we moved here. I
Yes.
grew up in Henrico County. My mom is a retired teacher from Henrico County schools, and I've seen that division grow and expand and to where they're resourcing their schools so much better than what we are, and had that experience in Montgomery County, which is, having that knowledge was one of the reasons why I wanted to be on school board, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, what other kids are getting outside of our county that these kids aren't getting, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be. So, I mean, just to think about, like, I just thought about the field trips and exposures that our kids get that expand or enrich the curriculum that they're learning in class. They hardly go on field trips, and there's no funding for field trips. And I think that's terrible, because we need to, in order for our kids to have more of an open mind, to think more critically, they have to get out of just where they are, just Spotsylvania. They have to know that there is more beyond Spotsylvania. And sort of really, I know that my kids and myself, I learn better when not only do I read it in a book, but I get to experience it. Right.
Right.
Those are the things that stick with me, I remember those experiences. I remember going to the Capitol and the National Library of Congress when I was in high school as a field trip. And I remember those things more than I remember whatever I learned in my class in history. So, but again, the funding isn't there, right?
Right.
And those are ways to invest in our children.
Absolutely. And I'm glad let me bring home with this. And you just talked about that, expanding knowledge, expanding experiences. And we know now, especially with the new administration, there's been a lot of talk about removing, quote unquote, divisive concepts in educational policy. What can be done to ensure that we have a curriculum that is expansive, that is including everybody's story, everybody's history, so that students can learn from different experiences, so that they can have more expanded minds out of what they may have in their own cultural bubble?
Well, we have to, it's disheartening to feel that people sort of, the purpose of not having divisive content is to keep people's minds more closed, right? So that we don't progress, as a population, so that what they're learning from home or in, maybe their small groups, that their kids don't question that because they hear something else in school, right? So actually, what the push to not have those, sort of broader exposures and teach the truth broadly, it actually reduces the ability of students to critically think and question things in their environment, right? Or what's going on, so that then they can actually improve themselves or their families or the community, right? And so, so I am really, for those reasons, I am really against that trend or push. But I also understand that, sort of the reasons for that push is, when they say, our teachers are indoctrinating our kids, it's actually, if you do what they are wanting to do, prevent our kids from getting that knowledge, then they are better able to indoctrinate our kids towards things that aren't beneficial for our communities, right?
Absolutely.
So we have to just, so basically we have to fight it at, taking content, truths, facts out of banning information, any information, unless it's just, okay, they get exposed at an age appropriate level, that makes sense. But to actually take knowledge out of our school systems is something that, I will, constantly and continually fight against. And because it benefits no child to do that.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you because you have been a champion for our students and for our teachers, and what you continue to do in the school board. I know it's only been a few short months, but you're already making waves, and I can't thank you enough. And we've got to do this again, especially
Sure.
with new superintendent going on board, whatever they decide to do. Nicole of the Spotsylvania School Board District, representing Battlefield. Thank you so much for talking with us today, and we've got to do this again soon. We'd like to thank Nicole Cole of the Spotsylvania School Board for coming on and speaking with us on this week's show. And as we get ready to go into this segment, I want to bring up something that, while it wasn't discussed in the interview, is something that we need to keep mindful of, and especially if you're living in Spotsylvania, Stafford County, or Fredericksburg, is the expansion of charter schools. Now, vouchers, which is something that new Governor Youngkin has promoted a lot. It was one of his day one concepts that when he was going to go into office, he said he wanted to push for it. Now, what does that mean? A school voucher is almost like a scholarship of sorts that allows for education tax breaks, that allows for parental choice to put their children into private or charter schools. Now, currently there are 7 charter schools in the state of Virginia with about approximately 1,300 students attending. But their goal, Youngkin's goal, is to ensure that they have an expansion of charter schools. They want to have up to 20 additional schools. But here's the thing that we really need to discuss on this show, and why it's so important for you to know. Why vouchers can actually harm public schools and educators. It's because what they're trying to do is remove not only from the school boards, from local school boards, from the term, because remember, local school boards have to determine where the charter schools be put in place. So they're trying to remove that and privatize education. Now you have to remember, when you have an administration whose governor has a business background, they're going to operate as a business. And we have seen that. We all know that a lot of charter and private schools came as a result of Brown v. Board of Education. So this has always been in the works for several decades. And so now we're seeing come even closer and closer to fruition. And now they're promoting more about the vouchers. If you might remember, back in January, the governor had proposed a school choice week. And why is that so important? Well, it's important to understand that because is they're pushing for more vouchers to give parental choice, which is essentially saying is we want to get our kids away from public schools and into more private schools. But they say, well, it allows more flexibility, or they'll say languages as it gives the parents an opportunity to teach their kids what they feel they should learn. Now, we all know this is nothing more than trying to be counteractive to the push for educational equity. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing trying to push to stifle the growth of concepts which are not even taught in public schools. And when we get into the critical race theory, because we've talked about that ad nauseum. But the issue becomes competition between private and public schools. Why? And so this is why we gotta be careful when you hear about the vouchers, because why it may seem like it's a reward in parents, what it's doing is pushing children even further away from the kind of segmented education that they're trying to receive. And what that also does, when you create this direct level of competition, it hurts teachers, because less students taught, it reduces the ratio. What does it also do? Reducing the necessity to pay teachers. And we know that teachers are among the most underpaid and underappreciated. And so special shout out to those in the school board who have advocated for a raise in teacher pay and for administrative pay. That's something that is a necessity. But this is a battle that's going to continue going on over the next couple of years with school vouchers. So you're going to hear more about this on the show, but also about now for school choice, because what school choice really does is a choice to remove children from the truth of Virginia's education and of their history. And finally, in our One to Grow On segment for this week, and many of you have been watching this show and you've been asking yourself, well, what can I do to learn more about what it means to be anti-racist? Well, there's great people at goodreads.com. That's www.goodreads.com. And they've given us a list of books. And for many who want to get educated on what it means to be anti-racist, it has a list of those books, and you'll also be able to find them on our sister website, www.pwperspective.com. And what it will talk about, certain books such as How to Be Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, or The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, or Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? So if you're looking at how to start the conversation or even educate yourself, go into our that website, www.goodreads.com, and find out more about how you can be anti-racist. Well, that's all for our show this week. This is John Reid from the PD16 perspective, saying that democracy is not a spectator sport. Tag, you are it. See you next time.